So what pops into your mind when you hear a body language guy? Do you know coming here?
He's going to analyze me.
Is he reading my mind? There you go.
I know when people are lying. I'm going to learn when people are lying.
Have you seen the show Lie to Me?
Oh,
yeah. Okay, well, you can rest assured I won't be reading your mind today. This is a safe place. As he said, my name is Jeff Baird, Business Intelligence Manager. Been in the IT industry for a while now. And I feel a little bit paradoxical at times because most of my background has been in data, very left brain, very logical, very reasonable. And at least in the past, I didn't really care how that data was presented. I didn't care how to go on it. I cared just about the content. But I've been on this somewhat reluctant path of discovery to realize and to acknowledge that how data is presented, how we're presented, does matter if we want to have influence and be able to persuade people. I was doing a presentation like this to IT security guys, and one of them was telling me a story about this really expensive gift he got for his wife. I don't remember what it was, but it was really nice and really expensive. Such a great gift. He didn't put any kind of presentation. He just gave it. And she was kind of annoyed at that. but that's how I've always looked at it in the past, was the content. But what I think you'll see here is whether it's data or whether it's how we present ourselves, it does matter if we want to progress in our careers, if we want to be able to persuade people, if we want to have influence, then this is an important piece that we need in order to balance ourselves out. So what's got me, there's a lot of reasons why I started studying this. One of them was because of Disney's Inside Out. You guys all seen that? Who hasn't seen it? Okay, someone give me the basic premise of the movie. What's the story about?
Basically, it's about how our brain works and how we handle situations that are given to us. What makes our personality.
Right. And everybody in this movie has 5 little characters in their heads for the 5 basic emotions. They actually consulted a body language expert for this movie because emotions and body language are a type of couple. And these emotions, well, if you're feeling anger or if you're feeling fear or sadness, they controls inside your brain and control what's going on. And in the movie, this little girl's name is Riley. Her family had to move out to San Francisco, and she was having a hard time adjusting to it. And in this scene, they're at the dinner table, and Mom starts noticing that something's bothering her daughter. Mom's a little nonverbal cues that something's off with their kid. And so she's probing and trying to ask what's wrong and not really getting very far. Do you remember what the dad was doing? He's sitting there eating, thinking about hockey or something like that. I didn't want that to be me. To miss those important cues that something is off, whether it's with my family and my kids or at work in a meeting. There's these cues that people are sending that can help us to communicate and understand better. So I started to fix myself so that I could better communicate and spot those cues. And then I started studying it as well, just so I could be better at doing this kind of thing. I found myself presenting and giving conference talks and things like that. And I get better. So that's, and now I go to their teams, whether it's sales or IT, to help them to improve their communication and to improve whatever their goals are to improve communication. So we're going to do an experiment before I talk too much more. Don't worry about the whole thing. We're in small groups. I don't think we have to use this. I want to show you a picture of an individual, and without thinking about it too much, I want you to just tell me what words pop into your head. Okay? Don't overthink it, just kind of first impression. Some of you may recognize this guy. Reserved, okay. Scared,
Nervous, anxious.
Nervous and anxious.
And I do recognize.
You do recognize him? There's some background about this guy. He is the CEO of a job recruiting company. And he used to have this picture on his website. He's changed it now. I used to go to the About Me page on their website. He had this picture. And all of those feelings and sentiments you guys just talked about are the types of feelings people would have when they see his picture and by virtue of that around his company. I've done some sentiment analysis from different groups. This is from one group. The bigger the word, the more frequently that word comes up.
Hunger Games showed up.
If you're a CEO of a company, is this the kind of sentiments and feeling you want people feeling when they go to your website? It depends on the company. That's a good point. Well, no, this guy's a military guy. That's a little additional context around him why he might be looking so stern. But for a job recruiting company, probably not what he's after. There's some interesting things when I do this experiment. I've done it, I don't know how many times, maybe 50 times with different groups. One of the first things that I find interesting about this is how quickly our brains are starting to make decisions about this guy. In just a moment, we're making decisions about how trustworthy he is, how confident. We're making judgment calls in that first impression when we first see him. It's also interesting to see how consistent it is across different groups. I've done this with groups in Africa, South America, Australia, Europe, and the sentiment tends to be the same, which hints at something interesting about body language. There may be cultural emblems in different countries, but to a large extent, nonverbal communication is how we're wired as human beings to communicate with each other. But even if you go to the other side of the world, they feel these same kinds of things when they see that picture. The last thing I find fascinating about it is what research and science says we should feel based on different nonverbal cues tends to match. So for example, he's got his eyes pretty big. You can see lots of lights in his eyes. This is common for a fighter if we're scared or we're ready to fight. That coupled with a cluster of other cues is starting to communicate to us that he's in flight and we had some similar ones here today too. So yeah, this is something that we're all wired to use as a communication tool. And what research is saying, change this nonverbal cue, or if you do this kind of a body language cue, this is what it communicates. That's good news. That means we can take control of the messages we're sending by tweaks to our body language. Does anybody watch Brain Games? Geeks like me love this show. It's on National Geographic. I think it's on Netflix now too. This is a brain game that we're going to play, where they're going to show you pictures of people running for political office, and using just the picture, I want you to see if you can guess who won the election. Okay?
There's even such a thing as a persuasive face. Want to see what we mean?
In this next experiment, we're going to show you the faces of different candidates for various local elections. We've paired up some of the winners with some of the losers. Something tells me somehow you're going to be able to pick the winner just by looking at it.
Ready? Go. So, which candidate do you think won?
What do you think, left or right?
Got it? Now here's the real result.
You're right.
Now how about these two? Here's the winner. What about these two?
Some are easier than others.
There it is. So how did you do? Did you pick most of the winners? The majority of the people we surveyed did.
So how did you pick those winners? How could you know, based on nothing more than seeing their faces for just a few seconds?
Bulgarian perception specialist Alex Todorov of Princeton University found the answer in a groundbreaking 2007 experiment.
A very rapid glance is sufficient to predict about 70% of the election outcomes.
70% of the time, we can predict the winners of elections based on their faces alone. Pretty incredible. What is it about these winners that persuaded your brain to vote for them? It's not just the clothes, the background, or even the smile. The answer has to do with two specific qualities you saw in their facial structure.
In our studies, we found that candidates who look more competent and more trustworthy were more likely to be elected in office.
Competence and trustworthiness. You may find it hard to believe your brain can make such complex social assessments based on a face alone, but it can.
70% of the time, you guess one election from just a picture. Does that surprise anybody?
Yeah.
Does it bug anybody? I come from a data world. It would be nice if we're voting on people based off their policies, their background, their principles, not on if they have good self-care. That's crazy. And if I'm honest, it bugs me. But it's a powerful influencer on if you get elected. And there's two traits that he mentioned that we're looking for in their facial structure to decide if we're going to perform or not. Did you catch what the two things were? Confidence and trustworthiness. So if they look trustworthy and confident, they're more likely to get elected. And of that, it's really no different with any of our important social interactions. If we're in a job interview, if we're trying to pitch an idea, if we're in an important meeting, if they see us as trustworthy and confident, then we're going to have more influence. We're going to have better social interaction. So there's a lot of different cues that contribute to this. Some of them are static that we don't have a whole lot of control over. Like how wide your face is determines how confident you appear to somebody or how tall you are. Those kinds of things we can't change. I can't do a whole lot about what's going on up here. I'm just going to embrace it, pick it up. Okay. But there are some cues that we have control over that affect our perceptions, that affect people's perceptions of our trust and confidence. So that's what we're going to focus on today, are some dynamic cues that you guys can try as soon as we leave here today and see how it changes your interactions. Now, I thought this was pretty interesting, and I guess it makes some sense for a local election if all you have is a picture. But do you think it would still work on a larger election, like a presidential election? Because on that, you don't have just a picture. You've got their voting records in a lot of cases, and you have all this media information out there. Do you think it would still work on something that large scale? Yeah.
There's any question it does, but you see it in the media all the time. Media outlet that's for or against a particular individual will use a good or a bad picture.
Right, they'll tweak it and change.
They tweak it. I mean, they've got 4 million photographs of somebody, and they just pick one that's why it works like based on their opinions.
Exactly. I've got some pictures of that too.
There was a big thing at the end of the O.J. Simpson trial. I think it was Time or Newsweek, one of them. Got a picture of O.J. Simpson, but then they darkened his features and they ran that as the picture for the story because they were against him.
It has an impact, doesn't it?
It had a huge impact. Yeah, there was all kinds of hue and cry about it.
So it's a huge, huge influencer on these things. I still thought it wouldn't be a huge influencer on a national scale because there's so much other information. But this professor, he came up with an algorithm based on nonverbal cues to determine how electable somebody is. He loves that, an algorithm of electability. And he put all the major presidential candidates through this algorithm to see who would be the most electable. So any guesses on who the 2 most electable people were out of the both Republicans and Democrats coming for the presidency?
In what time frame?
This last presidential election in the primaries. So Trump and Hillary were the most electable according to his algorithm. So even on a national scale, and this might not be the same for every election, but it still is highly correlated factor on whether or not you get elected. So of the different kinds of communication, we have verbal communication, we have nonverbal. What percentage would you say of our communication is nonverbal? It's got to be pretty significant, or we'd be having a different presentation here. 80%, okay. It depends on the study, but it's anywhere from 60 to 93% of our communication is nonverbal. And that makes some sense when you start to think about it. You can communicate some things without saying anything at all, especially if you know the person really well. But have you ever tried to communicate with 0 nonverbal cues? It's easier over text, but in person. If I were doing this presentation and do no hand gestures and no facial expressions.
That's a verbal clue. If it is, you're scared and you don't.
Right? Your brain's trying to make it mean something. Why is he so stiff? Why is he not using his hands? Maybe he's nervous. So even in the absence of nonverbal cues, our brains try to fill in the gaps. It's a huge part of our communication. But here's the thing, where do we spend most of our focus if we're preparing for a job interview or an important presentation? Do we spend most of our time on the verbal or the nonverbal? We spend a lot of time on the verbal, when most of the communication is going to happen is the how, not the
We
what.
spend most of our time on the resume.
Right. I've got thoughts on that too. I've got thoughts on the resume too along these lines. In a 30-minute conversation, 2 people could send 800 signals back and forth. And how long is the typical interview? An hour? So that would be 800 signals you're sending to the person interviewing you. Are you sending trust and confidence and other cues if you want to? And they're sending 800 signals to you that can give you an idea as to if they like you or not and how things are going. Okay? Vast amount of information that we don't really learn how to tap into. There's even some research that suggests between verbal and nonverbal is the more powerful side, up to 12 to 13 times. And all I have to see that that's true is when my wife tells me everything's fine at home, and clearly it's not. Okay. Everything's fine. Between the verbal and nonverbal, if they don't match, it tends to erode trust, and we tend to believe what we see over what people are telling us. So what I want you to guys start about in the messages am I sending. You don't have to get self-conscious about it, but start to be aware of it more. Be aware of what other people are doing and what you're doing with your own body language. And that's half the battle, is just paying attention to it. And I think I'm going to skip through some of these for time. Every good presentation needs a 2x2. So here's my 2x2. Trust and confidence gets you elected, but it also helps with any of your interactions. So what we have here is a balance of warmth, openness, and trust that we want to convey to people, but still showing confidence and competence and power. That gets you in that sweet spot where you have charisma, you have respect, and you have influence. We've probably had leaders that fall into this quadrant that come across as very confident, powerful, but maybe they're cold and aloof or a little bit of a jerk. Have you had bosses like that before? A lot of them out there. They can get their way through the force of their position, but in my opinion, they don't really lead and influence. They just use their position to get what they want. The other end of the spectrum is this quadrant here, though. These are people that you really like. They're warm, open, and trusting, but you don't see them as confident. These are the bless their hearts. Okay. You like them, hang out with them on the weekends, but if you don't see them confident, you're not going to give them an important task because you don't trust that it'll get done. Down here, nobody likes you. You're cold, and they don't see you as confident. So avoid that quadrant as much as possible. The good news is that you can push perception of your guests, open with warmth, confidence, and confidence. And that's what we're going to give you today. If you have time, 5 tips to balance this out to help find that sweet spot. A little background also, this makes this because I data guy at heart, my science. We've got 3 parts of our brain that roughly go up the evolutionary ladder. We all have a reptilian brain made up of our brainstem. Any guesses why they call it the reptilian brain? Yeah. Yeah, and they call it the reptile brain because reptiles have them. There's some clever scientists with their names, huh? Yeah, it's instincts. It's fight or flight. You look at what a lizard can do, it's not a whole lot. Fight or flight, reproduce, eat, and there's not much more to it. But this is the source.
Scientists should have been paying more attention to language arts.
Right, yeah. At least do it in Latin or something, then we can sound smart. We have this part of our brain too, and it keeps us safe. If I walk out on the street there and a bus is about to hit me, that part of the brain is going to act very, very quickly to help protect me. Go up the evolutionary ladder up to the limbic system. Sometimes that's called the mammalian brain because mammals have this part of the brain. This gives you higher level emotions and helps you to bond and connect. Mammalian brain or the limbic system. This little part here inside the brain. Now, mammals, who has a dog or a cat or something fuzzy, they're more likely to cuddle with you than a lizard, right? Because they have that part of the brain. That part of the brain helps to bond with other mammals. Your body produces oxytocin and a bunch of other cool things so you can bond. So those 2 parts of the brain, they're very primitive, they're very fast acting, they're very honest, and are the root of almost all the body language, at least all the honest body language. More evolved neocortex is the part of the brain that says, hey, it's not socially cool to show that I'm sad right now or that I'm angry. I'm going to try to suppress it and hide it. But the interesting thing is these parts of the brain, out of necessity, act so quickly that oftentimes those nonverbal signs will leak out faster than your cortex and say, whoa, don't show that emotion. So if you know what to look for, then that can be a very accurate assessment of what someone's feeling. Yes, yeah. Microexpression is a less than a second, fraction of a second, not involuntary flash of an expression on your face. And so a lot of times it'll just show on your face and then you try to hide it with a smile. The very first one's the most accurate. So let me show you an example of fight or flight in action from that part of the brain. See what you notice. This is a short clip. And I'm not going to give you any context yet. Just see what you notice. Went fast. Real life is so real time. I'm just going to go around Google Glass. line things. Did you notice anything weird? Let's watch it one more time, real, and then look down. Did you notice what the young lady there did? As soon as the shirt guy walked in, very first thing she does is she takes a step back, she folds her arms across her torso, starts rubbing her arm, and she makes this expression where she presses her lips together really tightly. Now, whenever we're reading body language, you want to try to get as many cues as possible, more data points, to increase the likelihood that you're interpreting it the right way. But here we have at least 4 cues that indicate that she's probably uncomfortable, right? She has some emotional response to the blue shirt guy when he walked by. This was.
She never makes eye contact. She never even looks at it. How do you know she's not talking to her?
It could be either, and that's another important thing. In addition to clusters of cues, you also want to consider context. Am I folding my arms because I'm defensive, or because I'm cold, or because I'm comfortable? And we'll get into that too down here. Context matters. Yeah. But we have at least 4 things that doesn't indicate guilt, doesn't tell us why. All we see is 4 that shows that she's uncomfortable with something. When or if we don't like something, or even if we're bored, we'll show those kinds of things in a number of different ways. We'll show it through distancing behavior. That's what she did when she took a step back to try to get ourselves as far away as we can from the discomfort. Blocking, that's what she did, folding her arms, putting obstacles between you and the sources of discomfort. Self-soothing, that's the calming gestures that we do. I see a lot of this in job interviews because we all get nervous in job interviews. So you see lots of this kind of behavior, which makes you seem nervous. Incongruent body language is just if the verbal and nonverbal don't match. That's where it comes. That's where our cortex is trying to suppress it, that kind of stuff. And then the micro expressions. All those are things you can look at to gauge how somebody's feeling. So this is the part of the brain that we're really going to try to focus on to build trust and to look for cues as to what they're feeling. So what do you think when we first meet somebody? What do you think we notice first on their body? And maybe a more accurate way to ask this is that primitive part of our brain, the five part of our brain whose job it is to protect us, what part does it notice first? Hands. Usually people think it's eyes or something like that, but hands are what our brain notices first. They are our trust indicators. And if you talk to an evolutionist, they'll say this goes way back to our caveman days when if we saw a strange man coming over the hill, we'd look at his hands to see if he had a weapon. And we still have that same primitive part of our brain that will look to see if they're holding a weapon or something. That's actually where the origin of the handshake came from. It's look, I have nothing here to harm you. I'm a friend. Shake my hand, I'll prove it. Okay? This is so powerful that jurors will find you more sneaky and less trustworthy if they can't see your hands while you're on stand. So I'll have to remember that next time I'm your hands visible. And as an example, this is one of my colleagues in the body language industry. He's kept his nonverbal cues mostly the same, but does one feel a little more trustworthy? Who would you more want to work with between these two guys, these two versions? Probably this one. And that gut feel that you feel is probably based off nonverbal cues. That's usually where they come from. So usually the next question that comes out is, well, what the heck do I do with my hands? If you've seen Talladega Nights and he has his very first interview and he's like, what do I do with my hands? The little awkward hand gestures. We could probably spend an hour just on what you can do with your hands and the kinds of messages it communicates. I want to give you just one thing that you can try when you leave here to see if it changes your interactions with people.
I'm going to say the same thing 3 times. I'm going to change only what I do with the palms of my hands. Now, I keep my body fairly still, so I don't use any of the body signals to infiltrate this. And I'll keep my voice as close to the same as I can. I'll say as close as I can, so that when you change your body language, it's hardwired in your brain to change the way you sound. So I'll try to keep it as close as I can sound-wise. And I'll use exactly the same words, same instruction 3 times. Now, your task is to decide, do you accept what I'm saying? Do you want to do it, or do you reject me? Do you want to fight me, or do you want to go along with it? You want to say yes or no. That's what you've got to do. Okay, clear on this? Here we go. Versus rubbish. Now, don't do this, just imagine this is what we're going to do. Now, in a moment, I'm going to ask the people who are sitting in these seats here, I'll invite you to come and sit on the side of the room, please. and I'll invite the people here to take their seats. Now, those at the back of the room, come forward to the front, and those of you in the front can sit anywhere you choose. Now, raise your hand if you feel okay about what I'm asking. People say, okay, raise your hand. And so just about all of you are prepared to do what I want. You don't even know what it is, but you're prepared to get up and do what I want because you feel like I won't intimidate you. Now, it might make me look silly. This could be a bit of fun. That's what your mind's thinking because I use a signal that appeals to your ancient brain. Let's try the second instruction. Same words, same voice, changing only command. Here we go. Now, I'm going to ask the people sitting on this side of the room here, I invite you to come and take these seats. And the people there, sit over here, please. Those forward, please, sit here. And those in the front can sit anywhere they like. Give me a word that goes with this. What do you feel like? A word. Okay, who feels like you're getting an order? Raise your hand if you've got an order. Okay, think about this. So are you telling me that all I have to do is change my palms from upward position where you wanted to do anything I wanted without question? Now I've turned it over. Now you're saying to yourself, hang on a minute, this guy's giving me an order. Well, maybe I don't want to do that. I'm an independent. I'll just check it all out. Make me laugh, funny guy. So now, how many of you are resisting? Let's try the third approach. Now, I'm going to ask you sitting in these seats here. You can come and sit over this side of the room, please, and those seats. I can sit here. At the back of the room, you can come forward, please. Sit here. And those at the front can go anywhere you like. Now, give me a word that goes with this, a word. I guess that was a word. What are you feeling with this? Well, this is more than an order. This is a directive. You have no choice, and you're an idiot. So we tested this in a very simple one.
This is just on a video, but gut feel, does it feel different when he changes hand gestures? And he said it's because this appeals to that ancient part of your brain. It makes you feel safer. You're exposing vulnerable areas on your wrist. So this is a way of showing trust, mutual trust, and in turn helps them feel less threatened and more compliant. But because I'm a data guy, I want to go beyond just the warm feels. When they've done this experiment with different groups of people, if they ask the group to do something with palms up, 84% of them will do what they were asked. As soon as they put the palm down, then about half of the people will no longer do it. And if they ask with the fingers, most people resist. Only 28% of the people will fly. Crazy amount of difference in just the gestures. He was trying to keep all the other nonverbal, just changing this drastically influences whether or not they're going to do what you're asking. Crazy, huh? So if you've seen politicians, you may see this type of gesture a lot. This is why. At least on the professional level where they're getting coaching, you tend to see a lot of the same types of hand gestures with these guys. And this is a common one, palms in or palms open, because they're trying to get compliance and votes and trust. At least when they're in control of their emotions. When they start getting angry with each other, then the palms come down and the fingers come out. So there's an open palm, there's a finger pointing. They all do it. They all do it. Okay, so try that. Try it when you go. You try it with your kids. That's always fun. Will you please go to bed? That changes things. There you go. That's right. But luckily, my kids are little enough; they aren't doing that yet. So another thing with hands though is the handshake. Handshake's pretty important in our industry, right? We do it culturally here in Utah all the time, and in meetings and then interviews and all sorts of stuff. And the handshake, if you do it right, it's worth 3 hours of FaceTime. Lots of information being communicated when you first meet someone and shake their hand. So what makes a good handshake? Culturally, I think we get this down pretty good. If you're in the LDS church, then we're shaking hands all the time. So what makes a good handshake? Yeah, firm but not too firm. When I was in high school, I did a lot of rock climbing, so I fancied myself as having pretty good grip. Yeah, pretty good, strong grip here. And then there was a 60-year-old professional racquetball player that shake my hand. He's like, "Oh, yeah, that's not too bad." And then he crushed the life out of my hand. That was probably good because I was a teenager, but that's not going to build influence or trust. That's just obnoxious. But if you get the limp fish, that's the other end of the extreme, then you're not showing confidence at all. So you want firm, but not too firm. Anything else about the handshake that you guys have noticed that people do that bug you? Or that doesn't seem to work? Yeah, turn it down. So unless you want to dominate the person or be submissive, you want to keep your handshake vertical like this one, straight up and down. this shows that you are on the same page, the same plane. If you turn your hand over the top, where you have the upper hand, that's where that term came from, then that shows dominance. And if you haven't noticed it yet, you'll probably start seeing this a lot. Certain individuals will come in and they'll try to get the dominant handshake. Elbow come up here, your arm forcefully, you'll start seeing that more. But if you keep it vertical, same page. Then the other tip is dry, just because clammy and wet is gross and makes you seem nervous. Okay, so firm, but not too firm, dry, and keep your handshake vertical. Yes, and we could probably, if you look at some of Trump's handshakes, it's not just the length, there's a cluster of other things. It could quickly turn into a wrestling match of handshakes or a power play. And I don't know if anyone saw that one with the Japanese prime minister, where he had the really long handshake. You know, that does communicate something, but it's going to be based off the cluster of cues. It could be a dominance, or it could be to show that you like somebody. But I've seen mostly dominance. In fact, I think I got one. I don't have it in this deck. I had a slide of a military guy coming off the plane, meeting a bunch of people, shaking hands, and he was showing he was in control by deciding how long the handshake was going to be. He was grabbing their arm tightly, and then when he's done, then he'd move on to the next person. And most of the guys just submitted to it. One of the guys actually kind of looked down and realized he was getting dominated. But then at the end of the line was another military guy, and he's like, "No, you're not dominating me." And so he just leans right in and grabs his arm right back. This is an arm wrestle thing of sorts for a handshake. But usually that's not what you're after. See.
So I have a thought. I mean, and this is possibly off wall from, but like my son will sometimes, just because he thinks it's funny, come in and just like drop his thumb down, so it just slips through, their arm goes up their arm. Is there anything that you can, take out of that as far as like, I mean, it could potentially mean something if somebody did that, but at the same time, I mean, how would you read it?
It sounds like a teenager goofed off. Like I haven't seen any research on that specifically. I guess it depends on what he wants to communicate. If he did that in a job interview, it probably wouldn't go well. And that's what a lot of this is really comes down to, is what do you want to communicate? I could do something completely different message here if I'm just sitting here like this and being casual, or I can try to show engagement. It's all about tweaking what you're doing to align your intention with the message that you're sending. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So here's some dominant handshakes. They both have a lip purse going too. We do that when we're holding something in. We'll press our lips together.
Yeah, those two like each other.
Yeah, there's a lot of love here.
Yeah.
Feeling the love. Another interesting aspect with, maybe I'll have to skip through this part. We're short on time. So the first step to take here is to make sure your hands are visible. Keep them out of pockets, keep them on top of the table if you're in meetings. Try this open palm thing when you're interacting with someone. At Disneyland, they teach people to do this, to point with an open palm as a point with the finger because of how it's received, and then nail the handshake. That's tip number one. Tip number two, I might have to cut out some of this stuff. Do you guys want to do power body language, or blocking, or self-soothing gestures?
Power body language.
Want to do the power body language? Okay. Okay, because that's part of our 2x3, right? So we need something that can boost trust, but we still want to come across as confident. This is one of my interns. What do you think of this as he's in an interview? Is he confident? Okay, and what are the cues that are communicating that to us? He's playing with his tie. His shoulders are forward, his hands are in.
Person he's talking to.
Exactly. This is all low power body language that communicates that he's not confident. Here's another version. He's got his hands on the table. He's got his shoulders back, his head high. It may not be perfect, but it's a lot better than that other one. It looks much more confident. So what we see here is two extremes. When we feel confident, actually, who's been watching the Olympics? Yeah. What have you noticed that a lot of them do when they win? I don't know if Sean White did this. I missed his, but what do you see a lot of people do when they get gold medal? They win. do something like this. You see them raise their arms above their heads. This is off my Instagram account. I'll watch for this for the rest of the week. Not all of them, but a lot of them do this kind of gesture. And what's interesting about this is worldwide people. So once again, we're getting a sampling size of all different cultures and backgrounds. Pretty much they all do it. All countries do this. When we are confident, when we are victorious, we show it in power body language. We take up more space with our body language. Our feet will be a little farther apart, our shoulders will be back, our head will be high, our arms will be a little more expansive. We naturally do this when we're confident. When we're fight or flight, or if we're nervous or not confident, we do just the opposite. We shrink up, roll our shoulders forward. I remember one time I was in an interview and I knew all this stuff, but it's involuntary. I was nervous in the interview and I felt myself start to shrink. I'm like, nope, I can't do that. And then after a little while, I started shrinking. Nope. Okay, so keep the shoulder back, head high. Not only is this consistent across all these different countries that you'll see this, there was a study done at the Paralympics with blind athletes. These are people that were born blind, so they couldn't see other people's body language to learn what the right thing was to do, but they did the exact same kind of gestures. When they won, it was expansive power body language, and when they lost, it was low power. So that gives us a clue as to what we need to do if we want to communicate that we're confident. Just be expansive. So let's look at a couple of examples. Let's pretend you're a hiring manager and you're coming out to meet somebody, and this is going to be your first impression of them. We already know how important that first impression is from those early exercises. What do you make of some of these guys? You come out, and this is what you see. Playing Candy Crush or something. Is he on that trust and confidence? Where would you rate him? Would you rate him very trustworthy or confident? What's that? Yeah, it shows something about priorities. His head and shoulders are down, so it's low power. That's something to keep in mind, because how often when we're bored do we just hop on our phones while we're waiting? But you may inadvertently be communicating low power when you first meet someone. So if you're going to get on your phone, I guess at least power pose when you do it. But you don't want to be hunched over and leave that message of low confidence.
Waiting for an interview, you shouldn't go on anything.
Right, that's what I think. What about this one? Not on this phone now. Okay. Yeah.
They're frustrated. Yeah, I think he's upset that he has to wait.
Now the arm folding one, I'll try to slice out a little time for that because this is the most controversial gesture in all the body language world. But that is part of a cluster of cues that's going on. His shoulders are still not back, it's still down. Still not communicating confidence and trust. How about that one?
Sir.
Looks worried there, doesn't he? Having his hand, that's part of those self-soothing gestures. We'll often touch our face or keep our hands up by our face. That one? Is that one better?
Oh,
At least more confident. What about this? Who says you have to sit? Now, some of this might depend on who the hiring manager is, but if I see this, that's telling me, this gives me some additional data points. One, he's talking to the receptionist. He's showing some social intelligence, some emotional intelligence as he's having a conversation with her. This way he can show good, confident body language and make sure his hands are visible. He's smiling, which is an awesome frame cue. That's a better first impression than what I see with most people when they come. What about that?
He looks almost cocky or arrogant.
Cocky or arrogant. So that's the warning with this is, yes, you want to show power body language, but don't overdo it. Kind of like with the handshake, don't overdo it. I don't want to be Shaun White going into the job interview. You know, my arms up in the V pattern here, because that's not going to fly. Even this one, it seems a little more arrogant and cocky. Okay, so what you want to do is find that balance of power, but not too powerful, expansive, but not too expansive. And you may have to play with that to find where that balance is for you individually. But if nothing else, keep your shoulders back and your head up. I still struggle with the posture thing. I always have that posture. Try to keep your shoulders back, and that'll show confidence.
So I've been coaching a little bit in past interviews, but it's like sometimes when the hiring manager, sometimes when he's kind of crossing his legs, sometimes you mirror what he's doing.
Yes.
So in some ways that can be good or bad, but
I do teach mirroring. But if it's negative body language they're doing, then I don't recommend mirroring.
Right.
Mirroring is something we do naturally when we're comfortable with someone, when we get to know somebody. And so you can leverage that by subtly mirroring their body language so they feel on the same page as you. It's a good interview hack. But if they're sitting here like this, you don't want to mirror that because that's counterproductive. If I come to another one of these, maybe we'll get into the mirroring stuff. That's pretty powerful too. So that's tip number 2. Make sure you're showing confidence, but not too confident. Okay. And with the little bit of time we have left, let's skip to blocking, because this is a fun one. Okay. We know that one of the very first things that young lady Jim did when she was comfortable is she folded her arms across her torso. That was one of the cues that showed that she was uncomfortable. So, blocking. Okay. Blocking is a natural response to discomfort. Put any kind of obstacle between us and the source of the discomfort. It just so happens that the thing that's easiest to protect our torso and protect us is our arms, because they're always attached to us. It's an easy way for us to feel safer, feel protected when we're nervous. So does that mean folding your arms is bad? No. Not necessarily. It depends on context, depends on clusters. So let's look at a couple of examples, some different contexts and different use cases of arm folding. This was when Trump was vowing to unleash fire and fury on Pyongyang, North Korea. His verbal content is fire and fury, it's power, it's aggression. Is he showing that with his body language, though? Almost looks like a self-hug. Okay. So in this context, if he wanted to be congruent, then he should have done something different, should have done more power body language so that it matched what he was saying. How about this guy? What pops into your head with this guy? Feels powerful here, right? A different context, different clusters of cues. This one's more of a power move. He's a CrossFit coach that has a teenage daughter. I think he's meaning exactly what he wants to. Now it's interesting because in a lot of stock photos, including the one for this brown bag, there's at least 2 people folding their arms. And it probably wasn't on accident that they picked 2 women to be folding their arms, because in that context, it made them seem more confident, more powerful. They're trying to find that balance between the warmth and power. Okay, how about this one? Yeah, so we still got the arm folding, but now we got a grumpy face and her fist. She's making a fist. It's probably because they made her wear that hat next to the wallpaper or something. I'd be upset too. So what you notice here, oh, here's another one. How about that one? You guys weren't here yesterday, right? Were you in this position yesterday on Valentine's? Oh, God. You know, he's showing interest. He's leaning in. He's pleading. He's fronting by facing her, making eye contact, and she's distancing and blocking and not making eye contact. So what you see is it really depends. Is arm folding bad or good? It really depends on the context and clusters. But the one thing I will say is that we noticed that it was a natural response to fight or flight. And so that may be how it's received too. Especially in a job interview, I probably wouldn't mess with folding my arms. I probably wouldn't do it because I don't want to inadvertently come across as closed off or defensive or nervous in that kind of a setting. Does that make sense? Saying don't fold your arms, just fold your arms wisely. Okay? Do it conscientiously, only when appropriate. What's great is I teach this stuff, and then once people know it on my team or at home, they can call me out on it and say, oh, shouldn't be folding your arms there. All right, we got time for this one. I'm going to show you an example of this. We'll look for clusters of cues too, but you'll see one that involves blocking. I want you to see if you can tell if Katie Couric likes what Ted Cruz is saying.
The birther thing was started by the Hillary Clinton campaign in 2008 against Barack Obama. And I recognize there are folks online that like to push that issue. I'll tell you, well, that's quite clear. It's actually come up multiple times in history. So, for example, John McCain was born in Panama, but he was a citizen by birth because his parents were American citizens. George Romney, Mitt's dad, who ran for president in '68, he was born in Mexico. His parents were Mormon.
So you're basically saying you don't believe it's an issue at all?
I think there will be some politically who try to push it as an issue, but
the most obvious was when she went like that, blocking. Did you see anything else too, though? To
She hit her hands.
get your hands down.
Dropped them underneath and she walked.
And she did self-soothing.
Yeah.
And her tone of voice. Tone of voice is part of the nonverbal communication. Cluster cues, and especially in this context, too, news people know that they can't go around like this on the air because of what it might communicate. So the fact that that, I think the context and clusters fits to show that she really didn't like what you're saying. And their political paradigms, that also fits that context. Here's some other examples of blocking. That's not always with our arms. It could be with an object like a briefcase or a laptop or a folder. Here he's got the fear expression and blocking of the mobile area. What I see most often in meetings is laptops. Laptops are sitting open and because we're all trying to get work done, but that can inadvertently become an obstacle between you and other people connecting. These are some local gentlemen that were running for the Utah House of Representatives. And I'll give you one guess who definitely didn't win. The arm-foldy guy. And Governor Herbert, does he look like he's open for questions? No, probably not. Now, it may not just be protecting the torso. We'll oftentimes do eye blocking too, just if we don't like what we see. Hopefully, if you gave your spouse a gift on Valentine's, she didn't say, "Oh, that's so sweet, honey." Because it shows that she may not like what she's seen. Lots of examples of that. This is a guy that used to work with the Rob. This is so common in sports that they have a name for it called the surrender cobra, where you put your hands on your head when that happens to the team. And once again, it's universal, whether it's a soccer team, wherever this is, or my son at the Pinewood Derby, it's the same kind of body language gestures, the same blocking methods. So with that in mind, let's see if we can apply some of these skills that we're learning. This is just a snapshot in time. It would help if we had a video, but who do you think out of this meeting likes what this guy's saying, and who do you think is either bored or doesn't like it?
Guy in the far upper right does not have a good day.
This guy over here?
Yeah.
And what's funny is this is often what we do with shame. This is a gesture we do a lot of times when we're ashamed.
Oh, maybe the guy closest to me is Ewing. What he's saying, she's got her arms fixed correctly.
How about this guy with the shirt? Probably not. I mean, maybe he's just discomfortable that way, which is fine, but he definitely isn't engaged. What we tend to do if we're really interested and engaged is lean forward, smile, head tilt, and nod. This is a video. He's probably nodding his head. He's probably nodding. They're doing the opposite. If distancing is what we do if we're uncomfortable, leaning in is something we do when we're engaged and we like something. Now, what we have a tendency to do is speak to the head nod or head tilt smiler people because it makes us feel. But are they the ones in a meeting like this that you have to convince? Or is it the people like this? Those are the ones you want to focus on. Those are the ones that you need to persuade. So in a job interview, if you have a panel of people and you got one guy leaning in like this, yeah, that's awesome. Okay, it's good, makes you feel good. He likes what you're putting down, but he may not be the one that you have to try to persuade. See what the other people are doing, and then you can adjust accordingly and try to build rapport with the rest of them. So that's the next tip. Unfold your arms, remove obstacles. I had a junior engineer that decided to try this. He was in a meeting with senior engineers, architects, managers, and he didn't feel like he was getting the respect he wanted. He had strong opinions on the direction the project should go, but he really wasn't getting much respect. So exactly halfway through the meeting, 30 minutes into it, he shut his laptop to remove any obstacles from blocking, and he put his hands on the table. And then another trick that he did is he pivoted his chair to face whoever was talking. It's called fronting. It's a way of increasing the level of engagement and listening that you're doing for the person. And he's shocked at how quick it changed the dynamic of the meeting. People started facing him more and talking to him more and ignoring everybody else on their laptops. And of course they would. They're like, this guy's actually listening to me. And he said he was able to then have some influence and direct the direction the project was going just from doing those three simple things. So this can be really powerful. So in summary, keep your hands visible, nail the handshake, power body language. Part that we skipped over, self-soothing, is just try to avoid this rubbing and fidgeting that might make you seem like you're nervous and less confident. Okay? And then unblock wherever you can. Whenever I do these presentations, whether it's a podium, I try to get out from behind the podium for that same reason, so there's not that obstacle between me and connecting. Okay, if you want to learn more, actually, I'll just social media things. If you have questions after this, or if you want to learn more, you can follow me on your social media preference. And I'm happy to answer any questions now. I can hang around for a little bit longer, or you can reach out to me there. So any questions? Open palm head tilt. How's the pizza? You good?